At 55, I believed life had quietly closed the door on love, until he knocked. The truth is, I had stopped waiting for anything extraordinary to happen. Life had shaped itself into a still, silent routine, peaceful, predictable, and unbearably lonely. I woke up every morning in a small, sunlit apartment that held more memories than people. I made my tea, opened my windows, listened to the same old radio tunes, and went to my job at the community library where silence was not only expected but required. Silence had become my companion, my comfort, and sometimes my prison. Most women I knew had lived full lives by my age, marriages, heartbreaks, children, lovers, photographs with arms wrapped around them. I had none. I wasn't bitter. I had simply learned to exist without expecting tenderness. I told myself I had books, and dreams, and independence. But deep inside, a quiet ache lived like a small bruise, an ache formed by years of untouched emotions, unknown intimacy, and laughter that never had a hand to hold. I had never been in a relationship. Not by choice, by circumstance. Life had been busy pulling me from one responsibility to the next. Aging parents, work, survival, and perhaps fear. Fear of giving someone the chance to hurt me. Fear of discovering love only to lose it. Fear that I wasn't beautiful enough, young enough, or interesting enough for someone to stay. So I built a life without romance and convinced myself it was enough. Until the day he walked in. It was a stormy Thursday afternoon. Rain slammed against the glass windows of the library like impatient fingertips. The sky was a heavy gray curtain, and the wind swirled leaves across the pavement in crazed circles. I stood near the front desk, clutching a broken umbrella that had betrayed me the moment I stepped outside my building. My clothes were damp, my hair frizzy, and my patience thin. I was shaking rainwater off my sleeves when the door swung open. A rush of wind entered, followed by a tall man holding a dripping umbrella. His coat was soaked, his salt and pepper hair ruffled by the storm, but there was something calm, almost serene, about the way he looked around before spotting me. He hesitated for 2 seconds, then walked toward me with a soft, apologetic smile. "You look like someone who's had a very long morning," he said gently. I blinked at him. His voice had warmth, the kind that felt like a blanket around cold shoulders. He extended his umbrella. "Here, take mine. I live just across the street. You need it more than I do." I stared at him, startled. No one had offered me something so thoughtful in years, not even strangers. No, I can't take your umbrella," I protested. "You'll get drenched." He chuckled, a sound deep and comforting. "I'm already drenched. You're only halfway there. I think you should win this round." I didn't know how to refuse politely anymore. His sincerity disarmed me. Slowly, I accepted the umbrella, our fingers brushing only for a second, but that second felt like my heart paused, confused by the unfamiliar spark. "Thank you," I murmured, embarrassed by how flustered I was. "You're welcome," he said. Then his expression softened, and he added something that lodged itself into my memory forever. "You look like someone who takes care of everyone but herself." I froze. No one had ever seen me like that, and he didn't say it with pity or judgment or flirtation. He said it like he understood, like he recognized a loneliness he had carried once too. Before I could respond, he stepped back, shook rain from his coat, and moved toward the shelves. But something inside me had already shifted. I watched him walk, steady, confident, warm. And I felt something I had not felt for decades. Kalan noticed. Over the next hour, he stayed in the library, browsing through sections, occasionally glancing toward the desk with a small, polite smile. Each time our eyes met, I quickly pretended to focus on my computer screen. My heart, however, had its own agenda, thumping with a youthful flutter I didn't understand. When he finally approached the desk again, he placed a book gently in front of me. "Do you recommend this one?" he asked. It was one of my favorites. A slow, emotional story about two people finding love unexpectedly later in life. I wondered if he chose it intentionally. "Yes," I said, my voice soft. Very much. He nodded as if he already trusted my taste. I'm Adrian, he said. I just moved here. I suppose I'll be returning often. Something about the way he said it, returning often, felt like a promise. Before leaving, he pointed at the umbrella still in my hand. Take care of it. And take care of yourself too. I watched him walk into the rain without it. His shoulders slightly hunched against the cold wind, and something inside me whispered, your life just changed. I didn't know how. I didn't know why. But I felt it deep. Certain, intense, like an old clock suddenly starting again after years of silence, and I had no idea that this man, this gentle stranger, would be the one to unravel decades of loneliness and make me feel alive again. For the next few days, I found myself glancing toward the library door far more often than I wanted to admit. Every time the bell chimed, my heart reacted before my mind could stop it. Sometimes I felt annoyed with myself. I was 55. Not 15. What was I doing waiting for a stranger? But the wait didn't last long. 3 days after our first meeting, he walked in again. Same gentle smile. Same calm presence that softened the air around him. He was holding a small paper bag, and he placed it on the counter with an almost shy expression. You mentioned you like chamomile, he said. So I brought you a blend I thought you might enjoy. Chamomile with a hint of honey and lemon peel. My breath caught. People had given me things before, birthday gifts, courtesy presents, the occasional holiday chocolates. But no one had ever noticed something simple I liked and brought it for me without occasion. Without reason. Without expecting anything. This is very kind, I whispered. He shrugged lightly. Kindness should be ordinary. That line stayed with me much longer than the tea itself. May I? He asked, pointing to the seat in front of the desk. I nodded, and he settled into the chair, hands clasped loosely as if he had nowhere else to be. Do you like working here? He asked. I smiled faintly. It's quiet, peaceful. Peaceful can be lonely, he said. His gaze meeting mine with an almost knowing softness. My chest tightened. How could he read me so easily? He came again the next day. And the day after. And the day after that. Sometimes he borrowed books. Sometimes he simply talked. Sometimes he sat quietly, reading in a corner seat where sunlight fell gently across his shoulders. It didn't take long for the other staff members to notice. One of my coworkers, a cheerful woman named Rena, whispered to me with a wink, your admirer is here again. He's not, I began, but my voice trailed off. How could I deny what even the air seemed to know? But admiration was a dangerous word. I refused to let my mind wander where my heart was slowly tiptoeing. Still. Every day he came, something inside me softened. And then something happened, small but unforgettable, that pushed us from acquaintance into something deeper. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon. Adrian had been sitting in the reading corner, absorbed in a novel. I was organizing returned books on a tall metal cart. One heavy volume slipped from the top and tumbled toward me. Before I could react, he was suddenly there. He caught the book mid-air, his hand brushing mine in the process. Warm, steady, certain. For a moment, our faces were inches apart. His breath mingled with mine. His eyes searched mine, not with hunger, not with boldness, but with a kind of awe. Careful, he said gently, his voice lower than usual. You could have hurt yourself. My heart fluttered like it hadn't in decades. I'm fine, I whispered, too aware of how close he was. He didn't step back immediately. He held my gaze for another heartbeat. Slow, meaningful, almost tender, before placing the book on the cart. But the air between us had changed. Something had shifted, quietly but undeniably. From that day onward, our conversations grew deeper, like small rivers joining into a larger stream. One evening, he lingered after closing time, helping me arrange the last few books. You work too much, he said. I like being busy. No, he murmured. You like avoiding being alone. The words struck me, not because they were unkind, but because they were true. Why do you say that? Because I know what that feels like. he replied, leaning lightly on the desk. My wife passed away 10 years ago. After that, I kept myself busy. Busy enough not to feel anything. I blinked, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. I'm sorry, I said softly. He nodded, but his eyes remained distant. People think loneliness is loud. It isn't. It's quiet. Too quiet. I swallowed. I know. He looked at me then. Truly looked at me. Something in my expression must have revealed more than I intended, because his voice softened even further. You've been lonely for a long time, haven't you? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence between us spoke the truth more clearly than words ever could. He didn't press. He simply stepped closer, slow and respectful, and said, You don't have to stay lonely. I exhaled shakily, unsure what to do with the warmth spreading through my chest. One evening after closing, he offered to walk me home. I tried to refuse, out of habit more than logic, but he insisted gently. It's dark, and I enjoy your company. The wind was cool, the streetlights casting a soft yellow glow on the pavement. He walked close enough that I could feel the quiet strength in his presence, but far enough to respect my space. After a few minutes, he asked, Do you ever think about starting over? I laughed lightly. At my age? At any age, he corrected. His tone carried something subtle, a question hidden inside a possibility. Maybe, I admitted. But I don't know how. You don't need to know, he murmured. You just have to want to. We stopped at a pedestrian crossing. A car passed, its headlights brushing his face. For the first time, I truly noticed the kindness etched into the lines around his eyes, lines formed by years of both joy and pain. You deserve someone who sees you, he said softly. I looked away, overwhelmed. No one had ever said something like that to me. When we reached my building, he paused at the door. Good night, Marianne, he said, his voice warm. I opened my mouth to reply but hesitated. He smiled slow, soft, with a hint of something unspoken, and added, I'll see you tomorrow. It was not a question. It was a certainty. And as I climbed the stairs to my apartment, my heart beating far too fast for a woman of my age, I knew one thing with startling clarity. I wanted him to come back. Every day. In the mirror that night, I noticed something different. My cheeks were flushed. My eyes brighter. My smile softer. I had begun wearing a bit of lipstick again, something I hadn't done for years. I styled my hair instead of tying it up. I chose prettier scarves. Was it for him? Partly. But mostly, it was for myself, because he made me feel like someone worth tending to. Loneliness, which had become a quiet companion for decades, now felt like a shadow slipping away. Adrian was becoming part of my days, part of my thoughts, part of my fragile, growing hope, and I didn't know whether to be thrilled or terrified. The days that followed moved with a soft, new rhythm. A rhythm I had never known before, gentle, expectant, warm. Adrian and I fell into an unspoken routine that neither of us acknowledged out loud, yet both of us felt deeply. Every morning, he would arrive at the library around the same hour, sometimes with a fresh cup of herbal tea for me, sometimes with a book he thought I might like, sometimes with nothing but his presence, which, slowly, became more than enough. I found myself glancing at the door even before opening time, wondering if today he would come early, wondering if he would smile the way he always did, a smile that made the corners of my heart unfold like petals touched by sunlight. One Thursday morning, he entered carrying a small wrapped box. For you, he said with a shy grin. Don't worry, it's nothing extravagant. My breath caught. Gifts from him already felt too meaningful. Inside the box was a beautiful bookmark, handcrafted, delicate, with pressed lavender flowers sealed under clear resin. It's lovely, I whispered. Lavender reminded me of you, he said quietly. Calm, graceful, soothing. No one had ever compared me to anything beautiful before. My throat tightened. Thank you. You're welcome. His voice was almost tender. You deserve nice things. And just like that, with one simple sentence, he filled a small, hidden yearning inside me I never even realized I had. One evening, it rained unexpectedly. A heavy, warm spring rain that soaked the pavement and turned the sky into a silver-gray blanket. The library was nearly empty. Only Adrian remained inside, reading quietly as usual. You should stay until the rain slows, I told him, glancing at the wet street. You'll be drenched. He closed his book gently and looked at me with a soft smile. I don't mind staying. My heart fluttered. It didn't feel like a simple answer. It felt like something more. Confession disguised as courtesy. We sat together at one of the reading tables, close enough that I could hear the rhythm of his breathing, the soft rustle of his sleeves each time he moved. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, but the silence felt warm, not empty. Eventually, he leaned back in his chair and said softly, "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. Have you ever been in love? The question struck me like a sudden wind. My fingers trembled slightly against the table. No, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I've cared for people, admired people, but love, real love, it never happened for me. His brows lifted gently. Never? I shook my head. Life kept me busy, and I suppose I never believed someone would choose me. He looked at me then with an expression I will never forget. A mix of sadness, surprise, and something like admiration. You sell yourself short. He murmured. You're remarkable, Marianne. Anyone with eyes could see that. No one had ever spoken to me like that before. Not with flattery. Not with force, but with sincerity. Your turn, I whispered. Have you been in love? He exhaled slowly. Yes. Once, my wife. She was kind, bright, and she loved me gently. Losing her was the hardest thing I've lived through. A soft ache settled between us. Not heavy, but real. I reached across the table, unsure if I should. But my hand moved anyway, resting lightly atop his. He froze, not in discomfort, in surprise. Our eyes met, and I saw something shift in his. His fingers curled slightly, brushing mine. Warm, steady, hesitant, yet hopeful. That small touch held more emotion than many people experience in a lifetime. I'm sorry you lost her, I whispered. He nodded. I am too, but life, it doesn't end with loss. Sometimes, if we're lucky, it begins again. A shiver ran through me, a mix of fear, hope, and something I didn't want to name yet. A week later, Adrian approached the desk with an unusual nervousness. I was wondering. He started, clearing his throat. If you'd like to visit the botanical garden with me this Sunday. There's a spring exhibit. Flowers, music, a small cafe. It's beautiful this time of year. My heart leapt, then stumbled, then raced. A date? We weren't calling it that, but it felt like one. I would love to, I said softly. His shoulders relaxed, and a warm smile spread across his face. Good. I'll pick you up at 10? I nodded, unable to keep the excitement from blooming in my chest. Sunday arrived. I wore a soft lavender dress, simple but elegant, and the special scarf I had kept tucked away for years. When I saw myself in the mirror, I didn't see the woman who had lived quietly for decades. I saw a woman who felt alive, who felt wanted, who felt capable of beginning again. Adrian arrived right on time, looking handsome in a charcoal shirt and a light jacket. When he saw me, his eyes widened, not dramatically, but enough to send a warm flush through me. You look. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Radiant. No one had ever used that word for me. He offered me his arm. I hesitated only for a second, and then I placed my hand gently on his forearm. The warmth beneath his sleeve made my heart flutter in a way I had thought long forgotten. The botanical garden was alive with colors, cherry blossoms trembling in the breeze, tulips standing proudly. Gentle sunlight filtering through branches. We walked slowly, stopping often, talking about books, life, loss, dreams, fears, things people usually hide. But with him, nothing felt frightening to share. At one point, we stopped under a blooming archway of pale pink flowers. He looked at me, the sunlight catching softly in his eyes. "You know," he said, "you're different when you smile." "Different?" I asked, flustered. "Brighter," he murmured. "Like you've been waiting years for someone to notice." I felt my breath catch. He wasn't wrong. "Maybe I have been," I whispered. A gentle breeze lifted strands of my hair, and instinctively, slowly, he reached to tuck them behind my ear. The moment lasted longer than it should have. His fingers lingered for a heartbeat. His gaze held mine, warm and searching. Neither of us stepped closer. Neither of us stepped back. It was a moment suspended between possibility and hesitation. And I realized then that I no longer feared the possibility. I wanted it. We sat later at the garden cafe, sipping herbal tea. A small bird hopped near our feet, searching for crumbs. The world felt peaceful, but the air between us vibrated with unspoken things. "Can I ask you something else?" he said softly. I nodded. Double quotes, "Do you ever wish you had experienced more?" His voice was gentle, but the question was intimate. Deeper than the others. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "Yes," I admitted. "Sometimes. Not for the reasons people assume. But because—" I hesitated, then forced the truth out. "Because I want to know what it feels like to be truly close to someone." He inhaled deeply, slow, careful, as if absorbing every word. "That's not something you're too old to feel," he said. I met his eyes. They held warmth, care, and something that made my pulse quicken. "Do you ever feel," he continued, "that you still have so much of yourself left to share?" My throat tightened. "Yes," I whispered. "I do." His hand moved across the table, slow, deliberate, and rested near mine. Close enough that if I moved even slightly, our fingers would touch. "You deserve someone who can meet you there," he said softly. Emotionally, kindly, patiently. A tremor ran through me. "And maybe," he added quietly, "you've already met him." My breath stilled. He watched me not with expectation, but with a deep, sincere tenderness that made my heart ache in the best way. "Adrian," I whispered. He smiled gently. "Don't answer yet. Let it come naturally. Let it come with time." His patience, his warmth, his understanding wrapped around me like a soft embrace. And for the first time in my life, I felt what it meant to be seen not as a caretaker, not as a quiet woman in the background, but as someone worth loving, someone worth choosing. Eleanor walked to Daniel slowly, each step uncertain, yet pulled by something deep within, a longing she didn't know she had been starving for. The wind blew through the garden, scattering petals across the grass, and the scent of lavender rose around them like a memory of something warm and soft. "Daniel," she whispered, and her voice cracked from fear, from longing, from hope. He turned fully toward her, and the way he looked at her, not as someone fragile, not as someone broken, but as someone worth choosing. "Tell me," he said gently. "Tell me what's hurting inside you." Eleanor swallowed hard, fingers trembling. "I'm scared," she admitted. "You've awakened something in me. Something I thought had died a long time ago." He stepped closer, giving her every chance to step back. She didn't. "I don't want to lose this," she continued. "And I don't want to lose you. But I don't know how to open my heart without fearing it will break." Daniel touched her cheek slowly, lightly, like asking permission without words. She leaned into his hand. "You're not going to lose me," he whispered. Eleanor closed her eyes, letting the warmth of his palm seep into her skin, into her doubts, into the wounds that had once taught her love was something dangerous. "I've spent most of my life," she said quietly, "believing love was not meant for me. That maybe I wasn't someone who deserved it." Daniel's brows drew together in a soft, pained expression. "Please don't talk about yourself like that. This is all new to me," she continued, her voice low and trembling. This feeling. This closeness. She hesitated. Breath-catching. This possibility. Daniel stepped even closer now, so close she could see the flecks of green in his brown eyes. You don't have to know everything right away, he said. You don't have to be perfect or experienced. Or confident, you just have to be you. And that is enough. Eleanor felt tears gather silent, warm, and full of the years she had spent holding herself back. Daniel, she whispered. What if I disappoint you? What if I don't know how to love someone the right way? You're loving me already, he said softly, with your honesty, with your courage, with your kindness. Love isn't a performance, Eleanor. It's two imperfect people learning each other. Her breath hitched. Come here, he murmured, opening his arms just a little. Like a magnet, she stepped forward, and he embraced her slowly, securely, gently. She pressed her forehead against his shoulder, and for the first time in decades, she felt held. Not out of obligation, not out of pity, but out of genuine affection. He didn't rush her, he didn't ask for more. He simply held her until her trembling steadied. When she finally pulled back, his hands remained lightly on her arms, grounding her. Do you trust me? He asked. Yes, she breathed. More than I expected to. Then let me walk with you, he said. At your pace, in your comfort. Nothing between us needs to be rushed or pushed. We're building something real. She looked up at him. Woman rediscovering the possibility of joy. And Eleanor, he whispered, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. You could never disappoint me. Not in 100 lifetimes. Her cheeks warmed, a blush blooming gently across her skin, soft, natural, unforced. He held her gaze a moment longer, warmth passing between them like a quiet promise. Eleanor exhaled shiky soft relieved seen. In that moment, she realized something profound. She wanted to let him in, even if she was afraid, even if she didn't know how, even if the world had said love was for the young. Because Daniel looked at her like she was not someone arriving late, but someone finally arriving where she was always meant to be. Eleanor took his hand voluntarily. Firmly, he smiled at the gesture, his thumb brushing lightly across her knuckles. It sent a shiver down her spine, one she didn't fight this time. Walk with me? He asked. She nodded, and they strolled through the garden as day faded into a golden evening. Petals drifted. Birds quieted. The air softened around them, and Eleanor found herself speaking with an ease she didn't expect about her childhood. Her loneliness. Her dreams she had tucked away, her small victories, her silent fears. Daniel listened fully, not pretending, not judging. Her eyes glistened when she confessed. I've never shared so much of myself with anyone. Daniel squeezed her hand. Maybe that's because no one before me earned the right. She stopped walking. Something in her chest opened like a window that had been painted shut for decades. Daniel. She whispered his name like it meant something now. He stepped closer, and the sunset cast a warm glow across his face. His expression softened with a tenderness that made her heart flutter. He lifted her hand slowly, reverently, and pressed a soft, meaningful kiss against the back of her fingers. Not rushed, not claiming, just cherishing. Eleanor's breath staggered. Her skin tingled, her pulse quickened, and her heart. Her heartbeat like it had forgotten how to be quiet. Her voice trembled, barely audible. Why do you care for me this way? Daniel looked into her eyes. Because you deserve to feel chosen. And because I want to be the one who chooses you. Her lips parted in surprise, emotion knotting her throat. And Eleanor, he added gently, I hope someday you'll choose me too. She pressed a hand over her heart, steadying herself. I think I already am. Daniel exhaled softly. As if those words were something he'd been waiting to hear. The wind rustled the lavender. The last rays of sun painted the world gold. And for the first time in 58 years, Eleanor felt alive, fully, beautifully alive. Inside her, a quiet truth blossomed. She was no longer afraid. Not with him. For days after their walk in the lavender garden, Eleanor found herself waking up with a softness inside her. A quiet glow, like something warm had taken root. She moved through her house differently, her steps lighter, her eyes brighter, her hands steadier. Even the mirror seemed kinder. It was strange. She thought how simply being seen, truly seen, could rewrite the heaviness of an entire life. Daniel had become a presence she felt even in silence. At the grocery store, she suddenly smiled at apples that reminded her of the ones he liked. In the evenings, when birds settled on the old oak tree near her kitchen window, she remembered his gentle voice describing their names. And at night, when she sat in her armchair with a blanket over her knees, she wondered what he might be reading at that very moment. She didn't say any of this to him, and he didn't push for confessions. He let her feel everything in her own way. That was what made her trust him even more. One morning, while Eleanor was dusting a shelf, the doorbell rang. Her heart jumped. It had been years, decades, since the idea of someone at her door made her cheeks warm. She opened it to find Daniel standing there with a tentative smile and 2 paper cups of coffee. "I thought you might like company," he said gently. Eleanor blinked in surprise. "You brought me coffee?" "I brought myself courage," he corrected with a slight laugh. "And it came with coffee. I hope you don't mind." She stepped aside, her voice soft. "I don't mind at all." He walked in, and something about the way he looked around us, if her home was a place he respected, made Eleanor's chest flutter. No one had entered her space with that kind of gentleness in years. "Did I interrupt anything?" he asked as she set the cups on the kitchen table. "Only my thoughts," she answered honestly. "And they weren't nearly as pleasant as company." Daniel smiled, then watched her as she took a careful sip of her coffee. His gaze wasn't intrusive. It was warm, curious, patient. She felt it like a soft hand resting on her shoulder. "I like seeing you like this," he said quietly. "Like what?" she asked. "Peaceful and open." Eleanor blushed, a small shy warmth crossing her cheeks. Daniel placed his coffee down and softened his voice even more. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I've been thinking about you, Eleanor," he confessed. "More than I expected. More than I probably should." Her breath stilled, not from fear, but from recognition. "I feel it too," she whispered. His shoulders loosened, relief flooding his face. They decided to walk to the nearby riverside, a place Eleanor used to visit alone on quiet afternoons. The path was lined with pale yellow wildflowers, and the wind carried the crisp scent of early summer. As they walked, their hands brushed once, twice. A third time, neither pulled away. Eleanor finally laced her fingers with his slowly, cautiously, like testing a new truth. Daniel inhaled softly, as though that simple gesture had touched him deeply. "I wasn't sure if you'd want that," he whispered. "I wasn't sure I'd be brave enough," she replied. "You were," he said. "You are." His thumb brushed lightly across the back of her hand, sending a small wave of warmth through her chest. They walked together like that, fingers entwined, hearts tentatively opening until they reached a bench overlooking the shimmering river. She sat down, and he joined her. The sunlight danced across the water. Birds skimmed the surface, dipping their wings, and Eleanor felt a peace she hadn't known since childhood. Daniel turned to her. "Eleanor, I want this to be real." "It is real," she whispered. "I mean," he clarified gently, "I want to be someone you can lean on. Someone you can trust. Someone who adds warmth to your life, not uncertainty." Her throat tightened with emotion. "I'm learning how to let you," she said. He reached for her hand again, holding it between both of his. "It doesn't matter how long it takes. What matters is that you're letting me in at all." She looked into his eyes, steady, warm, devoted, and felt something inside her break open in the most gentle way. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice trembling, "I spent my whole life waiting for someone like you. I just didn't know I was waiting." He exhaled slowly, eyes softening. "And I've spent my life waiting to feel this kind of peace with someone. Her breath hitched. Peace. That was the word she didn't know she needed. He brushed his hand along her cheek, slow and careful, as though cherishing a moment he never wanted to forget. She leaned into the touch naturally, without fear this time. You make me feel young, she whispered. You make me feel alive, he replied. The wind shifted, warm and tender, like nature itself was holding its breath for them. The moment she finally let love in, Daniel hesitated, his eyes searching hers. Eleanor, may I? She understood. A softness spread through her like warm sugar dissolving in tea. Her pulse fluttered lightly at the base of her throat. She nodded. He leaned closer slowly, respectfully, giving her full control. Their foreheads brushed first, a soft press of presence and breath. Then his lips touched hers, not demanding, not intense, just a gentle, tender kiss that carried more emotion than she had ever felt in her entire life. Eleanor's heart opened completely. Her fingers trembled as they rested against his chest, feeling the steady beat beneath her palm. And when he pulled back slightly, his thumb brushing her jaw, she felt a tear slide down her cheek. Are you okay? He whispered. I'm more than okay, she said, wiping her tear with an embarrassed smile. I'm just feeling everything. He smiled softly. Then let yourself feel it. So she did. For the first time in 58 years, Eleanor let love in. Not rushed. Not forced. Not fearful. Just beautifully, naturally. Fully. The kiss was soft. The moment was gentle. And the meaning was enormous. A new beginning when they walked back home, their hands remained intertwined. Not out of need but out of quiet certainty. Eleanor felt something new within herself. Strength. Warmth. A sense of belonging. Daniel walked beside her like someone who understood her heart without needing to fix it. And Eleanor realized, this wasn't a second chance at life. This was life finally beginning. Eleanor woke up the next morning with a feeling she could not name. It was not excitement. Excitement was too sharp, too quick, too youthful. This feeling was softer, deeper, slower. Like the steady glow of a candle that had been lit in a cold room. The memory of Daniel's kiss lingered on her lips like a tender warmth that refused to fade. She touched her fingertips to her mouth, not out of disbelief, but out of gratitude. She had waited her entire life, nearly 6 decades, for a moment like that. And when it came, it wasn't loud or dramatic. It was gentle, like a window finally opening after being painted shut for years. Her home felt different that morning. The sunlight settling on her wooden floor looked warmer, fuller. The quiet in her living room felt less like loneliness and more like peace. She moved through her house with an ease she had never known, humming softly as she made tea. Halfway through stirring honey into her cup, she heard a knock on the door. Her breath stilled. She didn't need to wonder who it could be. Her heart already knew. Eleanor opened the door, and Daniel stood there holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. Not roses, not lily, but simple, humble flowers from the fields near the river. Flowers that looked exactly like her. Delicate, unnoticed by most, yet quietly beautiful. I wasn't sure if I was allowed to come this early, he said, scratching the back of his neck with an almost boyish nervousness. Eleanor's smile widened. You're allowed. He handed her the flowers, and she brought them close, inhaling their gentle earthy scent. She blinked, touched deeply. No one has brought me flowers before, she whispered. Daniel's expression softened. Then I'm honored to be the first. She motioned him inside. He followed her to the kitchen, watching with admiration as she placed the flowers in a simple glass vase. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. It wasn't a grand moment. But to Eleanor, it was monumental. Because for the first time in her life, someone had thought of her early in the morning and come to see her with affection. The growing comfort between them. They sat at her kitchen table, sipping tea and coffee. Between them, there was no awkwardness, no uncertainty, only a warm familiarity that had blossomed almost overnight. I didn't sleep much, Daniel admitted. Because of yesterday? She asked shyly. Because of you, he said gently. Her cheeks warmed. She lowered her gaze, smiling in a way she had never smiled before, slow, soft, unguarded. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. Eleanor. Yesterday wasn't a moment. It wasn't an impulse. It wasn't something fleeting. She looked up at him, heart fluttering. It was the beginning of something I want to grow, he continued. With you, at your pace, in your comfort. Her throat tightened with emotion. Daniel, I want that too. He lifted her hand and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles, one slow, reverent kiss that made her breath catch. She had never felt so cherished. I want to take you somewhere, he said. Where? A place I go when life feels heavy. A place I want to share with someone who matters. Eleanor hesitated only for a breath. Let me get my coat. The cabin in the woods. They drove for nearly 40 minutes into the countryside. The city fell away behind them, replaced by tall trees, rolling hills, and sunlight dancing through the canopy. Eventually, they reached a small cabin tucked between old oak trees. It was simple, rustic, with ivy climbing the wooden walls and smoke curling from a chimney. This is beautiful, Eleanor whispered. It's my retreat, Daniel said quietly. My quiet place. And now, I want it to be ours. The word ours lingered in her chest like a warm echo. He opened the door for her, and she stepped inside. The cabin smelled faintly of pine and old books. A soft blanket rested on an armchair, and sunlight filtered through the window, casting peaceful patterns across the floor. Daniel stood behind her, watching her take it in. I've never brought anyone here before, he said. Eleanor turned, surprised. Never? Never. His voice was steady, honest. This place is a part of me, and I want you to know all the parts of me. Her heart trembled with a feeling she had never known, being chosen. Not by chance, not by necessity, but by genuine desire. They spent the morning wandering the woods behind the cabin. Daniel showed her where deer often came to drink at the stream, where he liked to sit and sketch, where wild herbs grew in small clusters. Eleanor listened, absorbed, enchanted. And Daniel watched her as though she were seeing the world with new eyes, and he was seeing her through them. When they returned to the cabin, they sat on the porch with mugs of warm tea. The world around them was quiet, untouched, serene. I used to think love was for the young, Eleanor said softly. Something that belonged to people with years ahead of them. Daniel turned toward her. Love isn't about age, Eleanor. It's about timing, and sometimes the heart waits. She looked down at her hands, then at him. Mine waited too long. Maybe it waited for me, he said gently. Her breath hitched. And mine, he continued, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, waited for you. The confession that changed her life. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that felt full instead of empty. Then Daniel took a deep breath. Eleanor, I want to tell you something, and I hope it doesn't scare you. She turned toward him, heart steady. Tell me. I'm falling in love with you. Her entire world stilled. The wind paused. The leaves hushed. Even her heartbeat seemed to hold its breath. No one had ever said those words to her. Not in her youth. Not in her middle years. Not in her 58 years of waiting. Now finally, unbelievably, someone meant them. Her eyes watered, soft tears gathering at the edges. Daniel, she whispered, voice trembling. I don't know how to say things beautifully. I don't know the right words. You don't need the right words, he murmured. She took his hand in both of hers. Her voice was steady, not perfect, but real. I'm falling in love with you too. Daniel exhaled, a long breath of relief and joy blended into one. He leaned closer, brushing his forehead against hers. Then let's not waste another moment. Their lips met again, soft, slow, deeply emotional. Not rushed. Not hungry. Just full of meaning. Eleanor felt the years of loneliness dissolve like fog in sunlight. Every doubt, every fear, every old wound loosened its grip. She wasn't laden life. She wasn't unfinished. She wasn't forgotten. She was finally arriving at her own story. Love that grew stronger with time over the next weeks. Their bond deepened in gentle ways. Daniel visited her often, sometimes with coffee, Sometimes with books, sometimes with nothing but the wish to be near her. They cooked together in her small kitchen. They walked by the river and watched sunsets. They held hands like teenagers discovering tenderness for the first time. Eleanor laughed more, truly laughed, than she had in decades. Daniel found peace in her presence. A quiet sanctuary he didn't know he needed. One evening, as they sat on her couch watching the rain fall outside, Eleanor rested her head on Daniel's shoulder. "Do you ever think," she asked softly, "that life gives us exactly what we need? Just later than we expect?" Daniel kissed the top of her head. "Sometimes later is exactly on time." She intertwined her fingers with his and whispered, "I'm glad you came into my life." He pulled her closer. "You changed mine, Eleanor." The final realization months passed, filled with a tenderness that surprised them both. Eleanor no longer feared the word love. Daniel no longer felt alone in the quiet spaces of his heart. And one day, as they stood on the porch of the cabin, watching the golden light of evening settle across the fields, Eleanor realized something profound. She was no longer living in fear, that she was living in fullness, in belonging, in love. She turned to Daniel, tears filling her eyes, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. "You saved me," she whispered. He shook his head gently. "No, Eleanor. You saved yourself. I just got to walk with you while you did." She wrapped her arms around him, holding him tightly, the way someone holds the person they never want to lose. Her voice trembled softly against his chest. "I was a virgin in more ways than one," she said. "I had never felt wanted, never felt chosen, never felt deeply alive." Daniel held her even closer. "But now," Eleanor continued, voice full of emotion, "I feel everything. And it's because of you." He pulled back just enough to cup her face. "No, Eleanor," he whispered. "It's because of us." And then, under the golden sky, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the world, they kissed a kiss full of warmth, meaning, and the promise of a life. They were finally ready to live. It wasn't a second chance at love. It was her first. And it arrived right on time.